Hi, you're watching Broken Silence. I'm Sanyya Gardez. When you decide who you're going to marry, do you follow your heart or do you follow your head? Joining me to get to the bottom of this is Dr. Naseem from Central Mosque in Birmingham. Dr. Naseem, you were saying that when you are considering marriage, when you are entering into a relationship, you need to have as many things in common as possible for that marriage to be successful.
Correct.
Now, I don't know if I agree with you. Like we were talking during break, I think that when people, nowadays, more and more couples are forming friendships before they get married. And if you have a basis of marriage on friendship, you are more willing to stick it out when the times get hard because you want to. And if you've entered into a marriage to please your parents, just because that person happened to be the same religious background, just because they were the same culture, just because your wife can cook, and just because she ticked off certain boxes that you had in your head, then you're more likely to stay in that relationship sheerly out of obligation. And probably, more often than not, 5, 10, 15 years down the line, end up resenting your partner. So I think it's very important that love play a role in who you marry.
Yes, and that brings us to the basic question, what is love? And how do we use that sentiment? When do we use it? Is it something to be used cheaply or very lightly? We see somebody, we have a little talk about what is called chatting up, and we fall in love. Now that is a very flimsy ground for me, from my way of thinking. I think it is a very respectable, very responsible relationship or sentiments, and it should be done with that degree of responsibility and not something that you call falling in love.
So are you of the opinion that, a girl or a boy who's of the age to get married should have his family and his parents kind of decide for him, because for her or him, it's very hard for your heart not to get involved in a decision concerning your life partner for the rest of your life?
I think there is no harm, and it is quite advisable to seek as many
But do you think that's a preferable way to go to ensure a happy marriage?
But the ultimate decision is between that person, or the two persons who are going to be enter into a relationship.
But yes, you said that, if you are entering into a relationship based on what that person looks like and emotion, then perhaps you might enter into that relationship with your mind clouded. Now, even if, if that person matches all your all the criteria, they speak the same language, they like the same food, they brush their teeth the same way, they like to have their tea the same way, you meet them, you think they're attractive, you're falling for their physicality, what they look like, then your mind is going to get clouded as well. So should we just take that part out of it? Do you think parents should then just say, I've chosen somebody for you, you're going to meet them on your wedding day?
Now that brings me to the basic questions. How much value should we give to emotions? For example, when I get angry, shall I give vent to my feeling, speak loudly, scream at people, or shall I control myself? Now, I think that is essential. Emotions are there, but one should develop one's psyche to enable oneself to control emotion, not ruled by emotions. And love is an emotion. I should keep it under control, dispense it when I decide that it is the right place, right time, right atmosphere when I should have love in that context. And not because I'm falling in love, then everything has to be turned around to suit a mistake that I have done already.
I can see that we're going to disagree on this, even if the show is 6 hours long. But this conversation that we're having right now happens across dinner tables in South Asian households around the world. When it comes to getting married, falling in love is an argument that the younger generation will always use, that I want to fall in love with the person that I marry. And people of an older generation always have the counter argument that you will eventually love the person that you marry anyway. And I don't think there's one right answer or one wrong answer. However, I do believe that if you have chosen to make your home in a Western culture, the fact that more Asians will now be marrying out of their culture, out of their faith, is something that we're going to have to accept. And we, as a wider community, need not make it more difficult for couples who have chosen that path.
Well, culture, whether east, west, or north or south, is not the criterion. A culture can have its good points, it can have its bad points. So to say that we have to adjust to a culture is not
adjust to a culture. I mean, we can't help but be influenced by the culture that we live in. If I live here long enough and my kids are born and raised here, they will be influenced by this culture. And if I do not want them to be influenced by this culture, I should pack up my bags and go back.
Now, what I'm suggesting is that we mustn't weaken that faculty that we have of making a decision, weighing the pros and cons and making a decision. Yes, we are living in a culture, but there's no compulsion. There's no need to follow that culture blindly. Choose. Make a choice. There are some good things, you adopt them. There are some not good things which are not good. You don't have an obligation to adopt them.
I know.
And I don't think anybody is saying that you should follow a culture because you happen to be in the West. Then you should become westernized in every sense of the word.
No, I don't think it's about making that conscious decision that now I'm going to follow this culture. Like I said earlier, you are influenced by the culture that you live in because you live in this culture. Because you are, you're exposed to the media, you meet people of the culture. You're in a different country. You can't help but be influenced by this. My culture is different than my parents' culture is because I've been exposed to different things.
That depends how well you have trained yourself. Whether you have trained yourself to use your rational mind all the time, or whether you have allowed yourself to slip into here and there. And I think, considered objectively, that is a better level of living when your mind is deciding all the time what you should do and what you shouldn't do.
I don't know how I would be able to put my emotions on the back burner and just make every choice on just an intellectual level. And I can see that we're not going to reach a conclusion to this. We will probably just disagree about this. But before we go to a break, what would you say to a parent whose child has come to them and said, I have decided to marry somebody who's of a different faith, a different background, different culture, different color? What advice would you give to the parent?
Well, I would say, isn't it late that you have come to seek my advice? You've already decided. At this late stage, I can only say these are the pitfalls, but the decision is yours. You should have asked my advice before you got into that situation.
But now that somebody finds them there, do you think a parent that should then support their child, or are you of the opinion that a parent should then cut themselves off and distance themselves from that child?
It's not a matter of supporting or fighting against it. It's a matter of accepting the reality of the situation and do whatever best you can do. There's no point in falling apart because somebody has taken a wrong decision, subjectively speaking.
Sure.
But there is other aspects of relationship. For example, my daughter, my son, there are other obligations that I have towards them. They may make a wrong decision, but that doesn't mean we should come into loggerheads and say, okay, you get out of the family and I'm not going to speak to you. We can maintain human, dignified relationship, although I will be sad that somebody has made a wrong choice.
That is a pretty subjective opinion, though, and I know that a lot of people do share your views, and I want to thank you for being part of the show today.
You're most welcome.
You're watching Broken Silence. We'll be back after this short break.